On today's LA Currents, we're joined by City Attorney Mike Feuer and Heather Aubry, his appointee as Special Assistant City Attorney, to discuss her new role. Then we take a look at the 30th anniversary of Americans with Disabilities Act and how the ADA continues to improve the lives of many Angelenos. And finally, we'll fly off to LAX for a conversation with the new CEO, Justin Erbacci, about how things are changing due to the pandemic. Diversity, equity, inclusion. These words have taken on a special meaning in our culture. We take a look at how the city's legal community is reacting. In the wake of all the protests and social unrest over the death of George Floyd, Los Angeles promised to make some changes. Well, changes are taking place. City Attorney Mike Feuer appointed a new Special Assistant City Attorney in the role of Equity Director. What does that mean? I'm delighted to be joined by Michael Feuer, the City Attorney for Los Angeles, as well as our new Equity Officer, Heather Aubry. Nice to have you here.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Great. I have to actually start with you because civil rights is in your DNA. I mean, this is something that you're part of a legacy family. And first, my condolences over the passing of your father. But your father is very, very well known and very highly regarded in regards to civil rights here in Los Angeles. What was it like being part of that legacy?
It was very special. I have a difficult time articulating just how special my father was to me and how much it means to me that I am, in a sense, carrying on his legacy. He was so committed to the cause of racial justice, social justice, fairness, and equality for all. He devoted his life to it. He was a columnist for over 30 years, writing for the premier Black publication in Los Angeles, The Sentinel. And so his voice was out there, his presence was out there. So many people knew and loved him. As a child, I would go around with him to various community events, and I was very fortunate. I treasure those memories, and I intend to carry on in his legacy the best I can.
I'm sure he'd be very, very proud of what you're doing,
well,
so congratulations. Mike, you made this decision to create this position. Obviously, you've worked with Heather for a long time, but how did you envision what this position would be, and what exactly would be an equity officer, and how will she interact with the diversity, equity, and inclusion?
In my office, I have a small executive team that leads the 1,000-person office that is the city attorney's office here in Los Angeles. I have one position. It's a position called the special assistant. Now, that position had been occupied by Capri Maddox. Capri, as you know, was recently selected to head a new department in the city, a Department of Civil and Human Rights. So I had a vacancy at the top of our charts. This position of special assistant ought to be the person in our office who is powerfully engaged on civil rights issues more generally, but also somebody who can focus both internally and externally on assuring that the remarkable diversity of our office continues and grows, on assuring that our role in communities throughout the city can continue to transform neighborhoods, to assure that every member of our community is lifted up. Heather is going to be a continuing champion for values that are deeply important to me. Fortunately, they're not new values for our office. We need to take things to the next level. You know, more than half of our staff is comprised of people of color, more than half of our staff is female, nearly half of our lawyers are people of color. Those are important statistics, but the statistics just begin to scratch the surface. There's much more we could be doing. And qualitatively and quantitatively, that's going to be a role for Heather to lead.
How do you see your special assistant position reaching out to this Department of Civil and Human Rights, and how those bridges can be created and the kind of dynamism that can happen within the city because of this new initiative?
I see my role as absolutely embodying the importance of equity, not just as a catchphrase or as a concept, but actually implementing it and making it concrete. So internally within the office, spearheading initiatives, collecting data, finding out where we are, listening first and foremost to bridge the divides that still, to some extent, plague society. You know, it's important to have a deeper conversation, and I'm happy to be a part of that. I want to be a part of that. And in terms of the role of advising the new department, I'm very excited about that as well. That department will be at the forefront of a lot of very important conversations and issues around discrimination and racial equity in the city.
Will this influence the kind of cases the city attorney's office takes? Will these conversations influence what kind of areas that you support, get the word out on? I mean, what are the brass tacks of this? What does this actually mean?
You know, it's a really good question, and the answer to much of what you've asked is yes. You know, we're in a city that claims to be the most diverse place in the world. We may be diverse, but we're a highly segregated city at the same time. And one of the things that I really admire about Heather is that Heather is a very direct person who likes to take on issues head on. We're not going to shirk from responsibility. We're not going to try to brush anything under the rug. We're going to be trying to identify the issues in their most direct and candid way and take them on. I was in a conversation with a number of lawyers in our office, and people were expressing their views about some of the racial justice issues of the day. And I stopped and I said, you know what, I don't think everyone's being candid enough. Let's start this all over again. And I recognize that in so doing, that's inviting a critique of the status quo, of where we are. That's how we get better. If we're not prepared to look ourselves in the eye and truly evaluate whether we're doing all we can to advance causes that are kind of catchphrases today, racial justice, social equity, inclusiveness, those are important words, but they don't have much value unless there's action to back them up. And the reason I chose Heather for this job is she's a lawyer and a leader of action.
You obviously have a civil rights background. You have a long legacy, not just from your family, but in terms of your own career. What is it that you know we need to change and do in order to move forward?
The office already has taken a leadership role in terms of LGBTQ and immigration-related issues. There may well be, and I suspect there will be, more opportunities in the area of racial justice and other marginalized groups in being able to have our voice as an office heard in those kinds of cases at the Supreme Court. Certainly there are legislative possibilities that we could inject ourselves into when appropriate. I certainly am very committed to staying engaged with the wider community. I always enjoyed, as an attorney, going out to schools, for instance, in South Los Angeles, where I grew up, and being able to relate to those kids, not as someone coming from the outside and talking to them about how they can come over to my side and, you know, sort of the promised land. It's not about that. It's about telling them, I'm one of you. I came from this very same place, and there's no shame in being from this place, and there's so many good people and so much that we've already accomplished and can continue to accomplish in this community. It's not about just leaving the community, but we can have an impact in the wider community. I think it's just essential for young people to realize that their lives are worth so much more than they may have been led to believe. Just there have been systemic issues of racism, sexism, discrimination against so many groups, the disabled, LGBTQ. Everyone needs to understand their value, their inherent worth from as young an age as possible. As
Lawyers, we are uniquely situated, right? Because when it comes to civil rights, many of those issues play out in the justice system, in the criminal courts. They also play out in constitutional practice before the Supreme Court. They also can play out in state houses, including in Sacramento, where I once served. They can play out in City Hall. Heather is pointing out they also play out every day on the streets of, again, a very segregated city where there is an enormous gap between rich and poor, an enormous gap between the fulfillment of potential among kids of color on the one hand and white kids on the other, especially when it comes to class and when it combines with race. That's not right. In many ways, that's at bottom what this work is about having, through the actions we engage in, whether it be in court or on the street, making sure that kids know how deeply valued they can be.
Right. Forgive me, I'm going to say something that your father said. A soldier never gives up, he just changes position. So congratulations on your new position.
Thank you so much, Maria.
Thank you so much, Mike, and congratulations. I look forward to hearing from you. I'll give you some time. Let's just settle in.
I'd be happy to return. Thank you.
We'll be back in about 5 minutes, Maria.
There you got it.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks. The Americans with Disabilities Act turns 30 this year. We reflect on this historic moment and the future of inclusion for our disabled community.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and Mrs. Bush.
I now lift my pen to sign this Americans with Disability Act and say, let the shameful wall of exclusion finally come tumbling down. God bless you all.
The Americans with Disabilities Act is what the ADA is, widely known as the Civil Rights Act for people with disabilities.
There was this grand understanding from the 60s, if you will, about civil rights and equality and what that meant, and the need to have a broad Civil Rights Act that protected people's rights, mostly around race, color. We have laws around protecting other classes, other people, other communities, but people with disabilities were historically left out.
"30 years on, it feels like it's been forever, and it feels like it was yesterday. It's amazing to think of a time when it was legal to withhold a job from someone because they had a disability, or that you could be denied service by a business or even your government because of who you were.
Years ago, there was fear. People would act as if somebody with cerebral palsy was contagious.
The biggest change the ADA has had on our society is actually threefold. There isn't a single piece of this. One is the mechanics. It's the physical space. It's buildings that are accessible. It's ramps. It's curb cuts. It's trains and buses. It is ensuring physical accessibility, mostly around facilities. It's also really important for people in the disability community to be simply included in civic society, to be part of society, to not be an afterthought, to not be an institutional space, but to truly have access to fully participate in all of life's adventures. And so the change to the community has been extraordinary. We are now integrated, for lack of a better word, into ideally all the functions of society. And then third, the ADA, I think, really changed the landscape for people without disabilities. It helped people understand who we are, the diversity of disability communities, and again, that we're really just the friends, neighbors, and family that we should all be participating with together.
What I think has shifted is the perception of people with disabilities by the American public. There's a lot more general sensitivity about how to interact with folks with disabilities. The number one thing, understanding they're just folks, right?
We're trying to combat ableism on a grand scale. And this just goes back to, again, every classic civil rights argument we've had in this country. You have to allow and facilitate all communities to participate in America. And that's what the ADA is about.
There's one phrase in our founding documents, a more perfect union, which acknowledges that we're both at once imperfect, but that our goal is to be as close to perfection as we can be. A promise to be made to all Americans about accessibility and equality and justice, that fundamentally that each one of our bodies has significance and matters. Each one of our souls and spirits should be lifted up.
Access to government has certainly shifted. People with disabilities, at least from my perspective, from what I've seen, are feeling a lot more empowered, a lot more invested, while still fighting some of the old institutional prejudices. And while they're still treated often as less than first-class citizens, I think we're starting to see a shift where people are starting to understand folks with disabilities have a disability. That's it. They can have the same discussions, debates, arguments, concerns, issues, worries that anybody else has, and is therefore has an equal place in government, in our democracy.
One of our top priorities here at the City of Los Angeles is addressing accessible communication. Again, folks tend to think about physical accessibility, ramps, doors, etc., but making sure that our websites are accessible, that every document or communication that city government sends out is accessible to people who are blind, to people who are deaf. It's a matter of technology that we're moving forward with very quickly. We're very proud that we have video remote interpreting, which is sign language interpreting for people who are deaf or hard of hearing at many city counters, literally hundreds of public counters across the city. We actually, during the COVID pandemic, expanded that service to testing sites and to the hospital ship that came into port here to support the epidemic.
I would strongly suggest that if anybody has any questions, go to disability.lacity.org. Drop us a line there. You'll find a link where you can just drop us a line there, or there's a contact information at the bottom. Go ahead, give us a call, drop us an email. Do what you have to, and we'll do what we've got to do to make sure that we support the constituency of folks with disabilities in Los Angeles.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the City of Los Angeles commemoration of the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act.
The Amplify Our Voices panel is one of two panels we're putting together for the City of Los Angeles commemorating the 30th anniversary of the signing of the Americans with Disabilities Act.
To make sure that people get an equal opportunity.
Remember that these are your entitled civil rights.
Their assistive technology is very much a part of them. It's like a body part.
It's really important to me to make sure that I can reach my students who may have some challenges.
Persons with disabilities have faced a great deal of discrimination, and when we add on race discrimination, it is, and then other, whether it be gender and gender identity, going down the line, it really does add up.
You go and you spend a few days with some nonprofit organizations who are trying to do the right thing, who people themselves with disabilities, working of, by, with, for people with disabilities. You'll start to understand the sort of passion that led to the signing of the ADA, that led to people with disabilities climbing up the stairs of the Capitol building. People with wheelchairs left the wheelchair at the bottom. You'll understand why people would put themselves in front of buses because they weren't allowed to get on the bus with a wheelchair. They couldn't do it. You start to understand the passion that runs very strongly and very quietly in the grassroots of the American public with disabilities.
Full inclusion is, I think, still a long way off for people with disabilities in our society. Too many systems come to deal with accessibility as an afterthought, and that's really profoundly disappointing on one level, but also a great challenge for us in the disability community to make that kind of change. We should never build something, create a program, respond to an emergency without ensuring that every aspect of what we're doing is accessible. Literally every aspect.
Cross street with caution. Vehicles may not stop.
For our final story, we head to the airport to see how things have been impacted during the COVID-19 pandemic. I sat down with the new CEO, Justin Erbacci, at Tom Bradley International. Los Angeles World Airports, or LAWA, functions as the governing body for LAX, the third busiest airport in the world last year with over 88 million passengers. I am joined by its new CEO, Justin Erbacci. Nice to have you with me. I can't believe you were able to take the time. I imagine your day is incredibly busy.
Yes, but it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. A new position always holds challenges, but I cannot fathom how it must have felt and the challenges you have faced since becoming the CEO just this June. How are you managing the whole thing?
Well, this is certainly an unprecedented time period that we're in, and it's just been a period where we've had to try to be as adaptable, as flexible, as innovative as possible to deal with an unprecedented situation. I mean, the airline industry and the aviation industry in general has never experienced a downturn like we're experiencing now. We had 9/11 and we've had some recessions where, there have been crises before, and the airline and aviation business is cyclical by nature, but nothing like this has ever happened before. So nobody really was prepared for it. And nobody really knows what the right answer is. You try to use, all of your experience and knowledge and be innovative, because we're creating a new normal, and we can't expect in an unprecedented situation to go back to how things were before. Things could change, and for the better.
What are the things that are innovative in regards to the future of LAX?
Since I get here, I've been trying to look at ways we can make this airport better through the use of innovative technologies and processes. And actually, that's really what is required in a situation like this pandemic. Again, it's unprecedented, so you have to look for new ways. And the fact that I was already here thinking innovatively and trying to get the rest of the organization to think innovatively really helps us right now, because we're used to doing that. So projects like the automated people mover, our consolidated rental car facility, our intermodal transportation facility, those are essential to this airport and this city in the long term. So we made sure that we did everything we could to continue with those projects so we can deliver them as soon as possible. We've actually been able to take advantage of the downturn to accelerate some of the construction around those projects. So those were really critical that we had to continue. It also helps us to maintain the jobs, so the construction jobs continue during this period, which is obviously very important.
Have any of the plans had to change because of the safety measures put into place, even for just not now for during this COVID-19 crisis, but maybe in the future? Because technology involves passenger managing their own day with kiosks or bag drops that are universally used for multiple airlines. Have you had to make adaptations to that, just along the lines of people touching the same piece of equipment and how that's going to be managed in the future?
Absolutely. We've made significant innovations and changes in those areas. We'd start with just the sanitation and the cleanliness of our airports. We needed to do everything we could to make sure that our airports were as clean, as healthy, and as safe as possible for passengers and for our employees. So from the very beginning, we really beefed up our sanitation efforts. We're using hospital-grade virus protections. We were doing extra deep cleaning in high-touch areas. We're using ultraviolet technology.
Is it working? Because there's a lot of press on that, and is it actually working?
We believe so. We're still in the pilot program for those, but we've seen positive results thus far. So we have ultraviolet lights in some of our bathrooms right now. So not only do they provide light, but they also help to clean germs. We are using ultraviolet technology on our escalators to stand at adjust to the handrails. So as the handrails go by, they get a beam of ultraviolet light on them that kills the germs on that. We're using touchless faucets. We're putting more touchless faucets, touchless water fountains in place. We were the first airport in the country to have an automated boarding process where you just basically look into a camera without your passport, without your boarding pass, and the gate would open and you'd walk onto the plane. And we tested right here in this very area with TSA and CBP how we can apply that technology to the security area. And we're now doing it also just downstairs here for a bag drop, so that people could come in, look into a camera, their bag tag spit out, they put it on their bag, and they put it on the belt, and they walk away. So we're trying to use biometrics and as much as possible in the passenger journey to make it a touchless, seamless process.
Are you working with other airports across the world?
Yes, absolutely. We even before this pandemic, we belonged to a group of 9 different international hub airports. And we used that and are using that group to look at how we can put in place standards to not only make sure that all of our airports are clean and healthy and safe, but also a framework in place where people can get tested either before departure or upon arrival, and if they have a negative test, then they would be able to either avoid or shorten any quarantine period that exists. We've also been trying to influence where we could how we deal with this at a national and international level. So we spend a lot of time with government and politicians to try to give them recommendations as to how we can make things better or how we might be able to adapt to this new norm for travel.
What could really knock it back? What are you worried about? Because there are sincere concerns. There are real things that will change the health and safety and financial stability of LAWA at large.
The biggest worry for me has been since the very beginning, continues to be making sure that our employees and our passengers are safe and healthy. And that's what worries me most, is that something is going to happen where suddenly our employees, our passengers, start getting sick and aren't able to come to work,
right.
Or worse, are having bad illness. The other aspect that you worry about is that the pandemic is prolonged such that all of the airlines and all of our partners are just impacted economically, that they have to go into bankruptcy or close altogether here, and that will hurt us from a financial perspective, and it will create a problem that we might have to stop some of the things that we're doing here. We're forecasting that our traffic will be 65% down from a year ago over the course of our fiscal year, which runs from July 1st of this year until June 30th of next year. And we're taking very responsible fiscal actions to make sure that we can operate in this environment where we have, significantly reduced traffic and a corollary, significantly reduced revenues. The things we're concerned most about is having a situation where, we can't make flying safe enough for passengers. Right? That is going to be a huge thing. I think that we're doing everything we can, and the airlines are doing everything we can to make the flying as safe, as healthy as possible. And I know our terminals have never been cleaner, more sanitary, more healthy. I know airplanes and the inside of aircraft have never been safer and cleaner. I feel so privileged to be in a position right now to be at this airport during this time. Privileged to be able to be here to try to do what I can to help this airport and this city and our citizens through this very, very difficult time.
Well, thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I wish you a world of luck, and congratulations on your new position.
Well, thank you very much. A pleasure being here today. Thank you for taking the time.
And that's a wrap on this LA Currents.